All right. So we got the playoffs around the corner. There are a lot of topics surrounding the playoffs with injuries. We have some play-ins. We got a lot of stuff happening, but ultimately, the value of the playoffs and how that plays into the highly regarded formula. How do you weight playoff performances versus regular season performances?
Well, I mean, the playoffs are going to be. Picture this. We count it important when we see people like James Worthy perform in the playoffs. In fact, he was a top 75 all-time player by the NBA standards. But when you look at his stats, they're kind of pedestrian. And mind you, was he the second best, the third best player on that team? Maybe the fourth at some point. Byron Scott was good, but the catch is during the playoffs, James Worthy performed. You can say the same thing about Kobe Bryant. There's a reason why, again, we put Kobe Bryant a little lower than most people would in all-time greatness, but you can't take away that Kobe Bryant was always present in the playoffs. So long story short, when if you weighed one game in the playoffs versus one game in the regular season, what would you think is more important? Obviously the playoffs. Now, how much more, that's up to each and every individual, but basically what I would do is say, hey, your relative playoff ranking all time compared to your relative regular season ranking all time is pretty much on par with one another. So if you have 100 playoff games and someone else has 200 playoff games, they're probably better than you overall in the playoffs. When you aggregate that across regular season and playoffs, give each body of season played equal weight, that could be 10-1 more important, 20-1 more important. And it should make sense because, that's where everyone's watching. So,
okay. So, you could put more importance on the playoffs. What kind of value do we put on something like the in-season tournament? Is it like playoffs junior? Is it like if playoffs is, 10 times the value, is the in-season tournament maybe like 5, maybe like 3? Like what's the difference there?
The problem with the in-season tournament is that we don't feel like there's a penalty for losing. Like when you lose the playoffs, that something is going to happen. If a team gets bounced in the first round 3 years in a row, guess what? The coach is probably getting fired because there's no progression. If you get bounced in the in-season tournament 3 years in a row, no one really cares. In fact, we've had situations where players lose the in-season tournament. They say, yeah, it's just like, it's only the in-season tournament. Now it's time to just, get ready for, the second half of the season or the Christmas Day games or just the next game. The in-season tournament loses what gives playoffs all across sports value, the scarcity and the consequence. The scarcity and the consequence are what make playoffs. If you lose, what do they say? If you lose, you go home, right? That's what makes the playoffs get the high ratings in sports. People know that if you lose this game, someone's not going to come back next year, and so there's a speculation around that. The in-season tournament doesn't have that gravity, and I don't think it ever will. I think they tried to mirror soccer and all those different types of international tournaments that they have. I'm not even going to mention the names because I don't follow soccer enough, but I do know that when all the European teams play each other and they normally don't play each other, that's something interesting. So maybe one day in the future when European pro sports catches up to the NBA or pro basketball catches up to the NBA, maybe there's some sort of in-season interleague play or Asia or South America. But until then, the in-season tournament is just kind of a cookie cutter copy of what soccer is, and it will never hold up to the same level of value.
It almost sounds like there's almost nothing there. It's almost created as kind of just an attraction. Because what is the point of, what do you win when you win the in-season tournament?
Well, I think you win the cup and maybe a little paycheck here or there, but that doesn't really impact a lot of the the high paid players that drive the competition. But at the end of the day, like, I mean, I think I looked up the some general results from marketing and revenue. The in-season tournament, I think, made about, for a normal regular season game in November, or I think it's November, for a normal regular season game in November, I think the in-season tournament drew 10% more viewership this past season. For Adam Silver, that's 10% more revenue that he can claim, ad revenue that he can charge for these advertisers. But for fans, real fans, in my opinion, that understand the consequence and the scarcity of a real playoff game, I don't think it's much to pay attention to. And at some point, in my opinion, here's the one way that you can improve it. Again, consequence and scarcity. You can't change scarcity, but you can change consequence. If the in-season tournament winners somehow got a bonus on their end of year record, it could cause people to play a little bit more for that. For instance, if, let's just say, the winner gets 4 games, a 4-game difference on their record. So instead, if they're 41-41, maybe they're 45-37 equivalent. They've still only won 41 games, but but because they have the stamp of the in-season tournament champion, maybe that could push them up a seed or two. I don't think it should push them up multiple seeds. So it's like they shouldn't win 8 games equivalent. But if you have some sort of real life consequence, so it's almost an indirect consequence on the consequence tournament, which is the playoffs, then maybe you could see some value added to the in-season tournament. But I think the NBA is scared to impact the actual records. But I think that would be it. Give the champion a 4-game bonus. Hey, give the runner-up, a 1-game bonus. I just feel like that's the kind of stuff that could make or break someone's playoff seeding, and for that reason, give it some relevance.
Let's take it back to the regular playoffs. Let's get off the in-season tournament a little bit. What are some of your predictions? What is the formula showing you? Any guesses on how things are going to turn out, just based on the highly regarded formula, the teams that are being formed or kind of broken down as injuries happen, as people come back from injury? What are you seeing?
Yeah, I mean, at the time of this recording, I think there's about 6 games left for most teams. So, excuse me, but you have Austin Reeves and Luka just got hurt. You have, and they're the 3 seed. Cade Cunningham, starting guard for the number 1 seed Pistons. He's probably going to come back from his collapsed lung by the time maybe the playoffs start. That's a maybe. No, I haven't heard anything, that, we're looking forward to Cade coming back game 1. Like, I don't necessarily hear that. And so it's like you have these weakened teams in high seeds. So, I'm looking at, the Charlotte Hornets, who were a borderline play-in team and had a resurgence after the All-Star break. They're going to likely be an 8 seed. I think 8 or 7 seed. They may lose to the Raptors or the Sixers in a play-in. They may not. But let's just say they get the 8 seed. You kind of look at the Charlotte Hornets hitting the post All-Star game season really hard, and it's like, wow, do they have a shot at beating the number 1 seed Pistons without their number 1 player? I'm not saying that it's gonna happen, but it makes for a more intriguing playoffs. And then you have the Lakers. Look, if they don't have Austin Reeves and Luka Doncic, and they're the 3 seed, or let's just say they go down to the 4 seed, they're either playing the Houston Rockets or the Minnesota Timberwolves. Without their top 2 options, and LeBron has done very, very well as a 3rd option, now you start seeing like the Lakers are again a first round out. In my opinion, all of that is inconsequential because no one's beating the Oklahoma City Thunder. Now they're healthy at the right time. Jalen Williams is playing great, and he's rested. He's only had to play 20 games this season, 27 games. it doesn't seem like anyone's going to end up beating them. The Celtics with Tatum back makes for more formidable competition. In fact, I think that with the Celtics without Tatum, they're a second place team anyway. So him being added, he's just getting warmed up. They'll probably end up beating the Pistons in a head-to-head battle if they're both full strength. I just feel like we've seen a lot of these same teams at the end of the season. It's not there's more parity nowadays. We haven't had a back-to-back champion since the Warriors back in 2018, I believe. But I think this is a year, despite how good the Celtics or the Pistons or even the Knicks are, and even the Spurs, like with Victor Wembanyama, I think that all of them are just fighting for second or third place to the Oklahoma City Thunder.
Now, you kind of talked about some duos in there. I mean, we have, Luka and Austin Reeves, kind of, the two main players out in LA. And then you have, someone like the Celtics. You got Tatum back and you got Jaylen Brown. You got like a Jokic and a Murray. When it comes to these duos, and then of course the highly regarded formula, are you able to kind of decipher, I guess, who the strongest duo is going into the playoffs here? Obviously, there's pieces around that, and we could talk about, what the formula looks like when you're looking at a starting five, when you're looking at depth. But what's the strongest duo that you're seeing coming in terms of overall efficiency, playing together on the court?
I still like to lean on. I think the win shares is a very good determining factor in terms of deciding who's actually playing well in an individual season. And when I look at the win shares this year, I see the top win share getters are, and mind you, remember this is about people who are available get the most win shares because you have more impact on every single game. And so people who are playing a lot, that's who gets it. Also, people who are very dominant get the win shares as well. So you can play fewer games, but you're doing more in each and every game, and you're getting more. And so when you combine that, you get obviously more win shares. So the top three, and I explain that because the top two are SGA and Jokic, of course, which is like no brainer. They're the top two competing talents for MVP, but the third highest win share is Jalen Duren. And you say like, well, that means your formula is broken. That means that the win shares is broken. Jalen Duren's not the third best player. He is very available. I mean, how many games has he played? Jalen Duren's played 67 games, so just as much as any other superstar, but he's also very high on points. He's basically 20 and 10, not to mention very, very efficient with regards to field goal percentage, gets a lot of blocks, not turning the ball over because he's not a ball dominant player. But then the next 4 and 5, the fourth best win share is Kevin Durant. Fifth is Victor Wembanyama. Luka Doncic is 6th. The 7th is Amen Thompson. Plays a lot of games, gets a lot of steals, rebounds, points. He does a little bit of everything. And so he has the ball in his hand. He's very fit. He's not turning the ball over like a lot of young players you would think would. And so when you think about these, and then the 8th best is Jamal Murray. 9th is Towns, and 10th is Kawhi Leonard. But like when you mention those, when we talk about those names there, Jokic is 2nd, Jamal Murray is 8th, Kevin Durant is 4th, Amen Thompson is 7th. From a win share, Jalen Duren is 3rd. Cade Cunningham, before he got hurt, he was like 6th or 5th in win shares, but then of course he's been hurt for a while. So when you think about the best duos in the league with regards to contribution to one's team, you kind of have to look at Jokic and Murray first, Durant and Amen Thompson second, and then maybe a Jalen Duren and Cade Cunningham third.
So what about outside of the playoffs? Because, there's also the topic of regular season MVP that must be had. When the formula plays out, do you see it playing out? Does it agree with who's that we have at the top 3 right now? Like, is everything that you're seeing in line with everything we're hearing in terms of the MVP finalists?
We have to remember that the MVP voting is exactly what it is. It's voting. It's taking human subjectivity and preference into account for to give a subjective title. And that's why the highly regarded formula basically disowns anything with regards to MVP, all NBA, all defense, all stars, Hall of Fame. All of that goes out the window, and we just get to the math because otherwise it's redundant. It's like, why are these people getting those awards? They're getting awards for the same reason we're counting these stats in the formula. And so when you think about the MVP voting, I mean, talk about a popularity or a political contest. I mean, even more so this year or the year before, I just see a lot of jockeying and lobbying and politicking for this is why I think I should win. This is why I think this person should win. I mean, at one point last week, I saw SGA and Luka before he got hurt. They were on stage post game and they're talking about not like heavy lobbying, but a little bit of, this is why I think I should get the MVP vote. And it's like, man, just play the game and let your game speak for itself if that kind of thing matters. But then you have people like Chris Broussard, the NBA expert, quote unquote, and he talks about how he wants to pick one guy over another. I think it was Victor Wembanyama over Luka because Victor is cool. You're going to use your vote for something as critical and as historic as the MVP of an NBA season, and you're going to pick one guy because you think he's cooler. This is why those types of votes are horrible for the legacy of the NBA. Now, I will say that over time, I think that as sports has relied on big data sciences, the MVP votes have become more accurate. So, well, who should be the MVP? In my opinion, the person who has the most win shares or the most dominant from that type of disposition should get the award. And so when you look back at like I've talked about in the listing, you talk about Steve Nash, who was the MVP in I think 2005. I think he was the MVP in 2005, 2006. And most people, I think it was, 05, 06. And most people generally give those years, oh, that should have been Kobe's MVP, but he was robbed because of whatever, Colorado Springs or he was not Colorado, but the Colorado case, or he was disowned by Nike. And so he was on punishment per se. But if you look at the win shares, even Kobe Bryant wasn't even the most dominant in that year. It was Kevin Garnett in 05 and Dirk Nowitzki in 06. Steve Nash was like way down at the bottom in terms of production for his team. I don't even know if he was top 10 in win shares. So again, a popularity contest. He was nowhere near what a win share perspective would say this guy is the most productive for his team. But as you get towards closer to like the last 15 years, you start seeing, LeBron James was winning MVPs and he was getting them in the early 2010s. Well, he is also the win share champion. Steph Curry was the MVP the year he had the most win shares. James Harden, in the 4 years that he was the leading in win shares, he had MVP once, and I think he was second place in one or two times. Jokic, 4 times win share leader, and he was 3-time MVP in those years. I think Giannis was the MVP in one of them. So what you have is like an SGA is the win share leader last year. He's the MVP. He's the win share this year. Win share leader this year. He'll probably be the MVP. Again, what we see is there's more accurate understanding of who actually is dominant and why they're dominant. There's a lot of arguments for Victor Wembanyama as the MVP or Luka Doncic as the MVP just because there's an emotional response to them playing really well in March. The MVP is not the player of the month in March. By all means, give him the player of the month award, but let's remember what the MVP is about. Or let's just keep it the popularity, subjective, flawed award it is, and let's focus on what actually gives people a notch of greatness on their belt, which is how much objective productivity they make in one season, which is based on win shares.
So It does definitely sound like there's some not undeserved, but maybe the number one didn't get it because popularity came into play, like you said. Let's talk about some of the unsung heroes of the regular season who didn't necessarily get into the playoffs. Maybe we're not talking about them anymore because they're not relevant. But what did you see during the regular season that really stood out in terms of the highly regarded score, win shares, things like that? Or maybe somebody had a historic season but didn't necessarily make it into the playoffs. What did you see just throughout the year?
Well, at the with the Clippers being a ninth seed, and they right now we're gonna get into the play-in soon, and we don't know if they'll make the playoffs by the time this video is filmed or published. But we do know that Kawhi Leonard has had a resurgence in his effectiveness. I mean, this year he averaged 28 points a game, 6.3 rebounds, 3.6 assists. He played 61 games, so he'll probably end up playing about 66 by the time the season is done. And that's pretty much the norm for all the NBA players out there. Like no one's playing, none of the high-end players are playing more than 70 games. It's an anomaly to see any more than that. I think that's the reason why Kevin Durant is so high on the win shares, is because he played 77 games so far. And I think and he's probably going to, let me pull that up. I think he's going to end up playing 74 games. He'll probably end up playing 78, 79 games.
Wait,
That's
did you mean Kevin Durant?
Kevin Durant.
You said,
yeah.
Okay, you said Kevin Garnett.
Did I say Kevin Garnett? Yeah, Kevin Durant.
So.
Kevin Durant's going to play 79 games. And it's like, wow, no wonder he's getting a whole bunch of win shares compared to other players out there that you would think, oh, they're better than him. But what do we always say with regards to, if your fantasy football team is playing and, you got a receiver, but he only plays, you have 13 regular season fantasy games, right? And he only plays 8. How valuable is that versus a guy who may be a step lower than him or a step less talented than him, but he plays all 13 of week 1 through 13? You say availability is the best ability. So these are the kind of things where it's like, if you're not present, you're not contributing to your team's success. And I think we've gotten away from valuing games played. But the highly regarded formula, win shares in general, does not forget that. If you score 20 points in 80 games, that's better than scoring 22 points in 60 games. Oh, but he averaged more. Well, you didn't play in those games, so who else was scoring? Maybe you don't have another 20 point a games guy. These are the kind of things that people should remember, but we don't remember that kind of stuff if we're only fed, highlights and justification for people missing games. Now, I've always been a proponent of players play when they want to play, because guess what? If you don't like how much he plays, like Kawhi Leonard, he was the chief of what is it called, load management. If you don't like that he load manages too much, don't pay him. But someone's going to pay him because it's the free market. So Kawhi Leonard, as much as he load manages, as bad as the Clippers were, he was very, very good. And this season went on under the radar because they are a 9th seed. And I also think that, the Charlotte Hornets and all the young players that are sharing that load almost equally, whether it's Con Canupo, LaMelo Ball, not Miles Bridges, and there's a few other players on that team. I'm missing it, but Brandon Miller and a few guards off the bench, that were brought in from other teams. That team is going to be very, very good if they stay one cohesive unit next season, and they won't get a lot of credit because a lot of their success came later on in the season. But that's the kind of team where people say next year, where did they come from? And hopefully they get some nationally televised games, because it's a shame that we have to watch the Warriors on NBC and ESPN every single night, and Steph Curry ain't even playing. I don't know who makes that television schedule. The NFL, they flex games, and maybe the NBA should learn to do that too.
Let's take it back to load management a little bit, and also back to the MVP race. Because there's also the discussion of the 65 game minimum and how that's kind of affecting who is able to be eligible. And injuries coming into play, exceptions being made. Is the 65 game minimum, does it make sense in the long run? I mean, maybe these things are hard to predict, but how do you feel about that so far?
I don't know if this is an old Russian saying. My wife would say, oh, there's an old Russian saying because she's Russian, and she would translate it, and she says, man makes plans and God laughs. And I think we have something in America too. But when we say that, what does that mean? Well, it's like, you kind of plan out, oh, if I just miss this game and that game, oh, I take my time coming back, everything's going to be okay because, I'll probably play like 68 games and I'll be, I'll make the cut for all the NBA awards. But then, look what happens. Like, you have all of these critical injuries. Austin Reeves got hurt twice now. Like, he could have, as good as he was playing, he could have been in line for an all-NBA third team because they always give preference to the Lakers, right? And he was scoring at such a high clip early on in the season. Then he got hurt, and now he's hurt again. Luka Doncic, he gets hurt on the 64th game. Heartbreaking because it was very, very, historic. You could say historic. He was very highly productive. Clearly the third best player in the league, in my opinion. And then you have, there's a couple more people. Who else? But and Cade Cunningham, who had a collapsed lung, and he was going to be a first team All NBA player, of course, but he only got to 61 games. I don't like the idea of, oh, the NBA has only been doing this for 3 years. The NBA should not repeal this, because what's going to end up happening is, because of social media and because of there's so much hype around marketable players, they're going to get even more of a benefit of the doubt and have less reason to show up for games if they feel like they would benefit if they load managed a little bit. Now, I was talking to a buddy of mine, and he's heard some conversations about an alternative system where you judge by minutes played, or you set the threshold at minutes played rather than games played. So, if you've played, let's just say you've played 35 minutes a game, 35 minutes on average, but you only played 60 games. Well, maybe you hit that threshold, which is, I'm not going to do math right now while we're recording, 180 plus, 1800 plus. I'm not even going to try. But the catch is that maybe a minute cap or a minute floor is more important than a game's floor. And so, because guess what? If you play a lot average 38 minutes a game, which some people do, Tyrese Maxey, but he gets hurt and may only play 63 games. He actually played more than Victor Wembanyama, who only averages 29 minutes. So what's better? Like, don't you, from an NBA perspective, they want to have more minutes for all the stars, which means more shots for the stars, more potential highlights, more clips, more shorts, which drives more engagement. So I think a smart thing for the NBA would be to shift the requirement and maintain some sort of level. I don't know what it is. If you just have to look at what the average minutes played and kind of push the limits so that they're not load managing in that realm either. But there should be a cap to force people to play, because nowadays there's no reason to play if you get paid and you get awarded. There's no incentive, and you can't make them because they're beyond wealthy. And I don't blame them. So there has to be a middle ground, and I think middle minute cap or minute floor is the best way to go about it.
Ultimately, you can put in a minute cap. You can shift things around. The PGA has a cut line. In school, a 90 is an A and an 89 is a B, and there's nothing you can do about it. I think ultimately there's always going to be that one special case, just like that one person knocking on the professor's door saying, hey, yeah, I know I got an 89, but can you help me out? And it's like, no matter where you move that line, it's going to be, hey, I got a 79. Can you bump me up to an 80? I don't know if there's any way around that. And I think there's probably going to be a complaint. There's going to be people asking for exceptions no matter what you do. So is there really a point in moving it?
At the end of the day, I think the catch is maybe they like the first thing I said, man makes plans and God laughs. Maybe your plans should mitigate, hey, I may get hurt and miss 15 games, so I better play every single game I possibly can. And if I'm 80% good, maybe I should just play. But people are, they're waiting to be full 100% full strength. But at what cost? If those, again, it sucks to miss out on a first team all NBA nod. But from the NBA's perspective, it sucks to have you miss, a quarter of your games. And now if you look at I was looking at the top 30 scorers in the NBA, and all of them except for Kevin Durant is like below 70 games, and we're almost at the end of the season. So no one's playing, 82. It's not even a thing to play 82 games anymore. Not for an all-star, not for someone scoring, not for your top scorer on your team. They're kicking it for 25% of the time. Good for the bench players who get more shot attempts, but if you miss out on, if you have an unforeseen injury, you have no one to blame but yourself. If you are choosing to coast and to load manage because of rest.
So I know we've been talking a lot about current players. I know one thing that players of old, previous eras, they talk about their lack of load management. They were always looking to play 82 games. Obviously, it's different now, but you're talking about we're talking about minutes versus games played and things of that nature. Maybe if there wasn't load management, but what about the minute side for players, from the Jordan era or something like that? Were they able to play 82 games because they played less minutes overall? Or were they really just quote unquote tougher, as they say? Like what do the numbers show on your end?
I gotta say that they were just playing more. I mean, if you look at the leaders of if you were to look at all-time leaders in minutes played, career, you don't have a lot of current players, or even the all-time. Let me pull that up. All-time single season minutes played. Who are the players that are doing that? The top players in minutes played are all from the 70s. It's I don't see anyone that's current. I see I see Michael Finley, who's 55th. I don't see a lot of minutes played. Allen Iverson, 47th all time. People just don't play a lot. LeBron James is the first time the highest active player in terms of minutes played. LeBron James in 2004, 2005 played 3,388 minutes, and that's tied for 85th most. So you don't see anyone that's a current player higher than that. So I think that answers the question. People just don't play a lot, and
they did that in Chuck Taylor's.
And I didn't want to mention that, but you're saying it. I don't know. You could look at the way they played. Maybe the games were a little slower pace. Of course, they were athletic and fast, and their bodies adjust to the tools that they're given. Also, those players played a whole lot less in terms of years played. So now you have people for the. It's what would you rather have? Would you rather have Elvin Hayes play 36 minutes a season, and maybe he only plays, and Elvin had a long career, but let's just say the average replacement player of him plays 10 seasons and they're done, and that's for them. You rookie at 22, you're retiring at 32. 32, that's young, or you have all these great players. Luka Doncic, big 6'6", 6'7" guy who doesn't need to be extra fast to get his bucket. He can probably play until he's 38, 39. He doesn't need to be fast to separate and to create a bucket for himself. LeBron James is playing 23 years now. That's unheard of with the type of explosiveness, the type of the archetype of his player build. It's who played. I mean, Larry Bird was broken after 12 seasons. So I think that there's a give and take. There's a trade-off here where, players may be playing 70 games, 60 games, but you're going to see them for 5 years more than you saw your favorite player back in the day. And for a team, that's kind of what team managers have to, general managers, front offices have to determine. Do you want a player that plays 82 games and then they're beat up after that? Or load managing is a better investment for their multi-million dollar player. I mean, you're going to pay these guys 300 million, 400 million over the course of their career now. A lot of them are going to get 600 million, the high end ones. What are they going, like, how are you making sure that they're worth all that money? You probably want, and I think the answer is the proof is in the pudding. Load management is agreed upon by these front offices. The players aren't dodging games. The front offices are saying, the team's training staff are saying, yeah, we're going to let him rest this game. We're going to let him rest that game for the sake of longevity of their career. I mean, how many times did they shut down? Now people are shut down for the entire season. Victor Wembanyama, if I think in his first season, when they knew, like, okay, we've seen enough, we're going to shut him down the rest of the season. He didn't get hurt. Like, they just shut him down. They said, we're not going to risk anything because this guy is our golden goose. They didn't treat players like that in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and there's repercussions for that.
All right. Last question for you here, because you mentioned basically nobody being able to stop OKC as they head into the finals, eyeing that championship. But who has the best chance and why?
I mean, I'm not ready to give the San Antonio Spurs any kind of real credit because maybe I'm going into the bias of, they haven't done anything yet in the playoffs. We've seen teams before where they surge in the regular season out of nowhere, but then they get quickly served up in the playoffs because maybe they're inexperienced with how 7-game series go. The Houston Rockets were a recent example of that last year. I think they were a 2nd seed, and they were dispatched. I forgot who the 7th seed was. And so I see the Spurs in that similar fit right here. And they're going to probably end up facing the Phoenix Suns, who aren't necessarily, that team to go get them. But then you start looking at, well, what's the next game after that? You start looking at the Timberwolves, the Rockets, and the Nuggets. Lakers are hurt. I really can't count them in. But those 3 teams have been in the playoffs multiple years and have been through multiple series over the last 5 years. And I think there may be enough experience to bounce them. And so that's why I'm, keying in on the Spurs and saying, like, you would think, oh yeah, the Spurs, this is the one. That's not this year. Maybe next year. They're maturing fast. The culture there is obviously smart with the talent that they acquire and keep. But then you start looking at the Celtics, who now has Tatum, fresh Tatum, seemingly productive with his, healed up with his mended Achilles. Got a triple-double last week. Doing very well, and he's fresh. He's like, all he's done is train this whole season where everyone else has played 60, 70 games. They're kind of beat up and they're going into the playoffs. You start looking at these teams, who has the fresh players that maybe have been hurt and are getting healthy at the right time. The problem is that, the Thunder have Jalen Williams, who's getting healthy at the right time. And so whatever benefit that would give the Celtics, or even Cade Cunningham, who's been out for a couple weeks, got a little break to kind of turn back to freshen up his legs for the playoffs, is that Jalen Williams had the same benefit. And I mean, you saw how easily they dispatched the Lakers. They had like 80 points at halftime. It's like, I don't think anyone's stopping the Thunder. Now I think they will give them, I think a lot of teams will give them a run for their money. I think it's maybe the youth and immaturity of the Thunder, despite their playoff experience. They almost let the Indiana Pacers beat them in 7 games. So I think there's like almost like the Thunder can get bored and maybe someone can nip at their heels before they finally wake up to keep it interesting. But I think the Thunder are as close to a perfect team as you can possibly get. And there's no stopping that storm.
What does a perfect team look like when it comes to the the highly regarded formula? Do you start seeing things when you start looking at the starting five and the depth and or maybe just a certain efficiency number that you're seeing by the totality of all of the players on the team? What does that look like?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And so when you look at the Thunder's team, first of all, depth is always good. Someone gets hurt, next man up, and the next man isn't on his way to Europe or out of the NBA. The next man is likely a high rotation player, if not a starter on the average NBA team. But first of all, you need a point man. And when I'm talking about point man, not a point guard, but a point of attack player where you get a near guaranteed bucket. That would be the Shaq profile, the Tim Duncan profile, the Michael Jordan profile. And for this team, it's Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. He just can't, he's a guard shooting over 55%. He's shooting 55% from the field. It's as perfect as a guard as you can get. I mean, Jordan had similar seasons, but this guy is making you remember that we've gotten so used to volume shooters like Kobe Bryant and Allen Iverson, and that was nostalgic and made regular people feel good because regular people miss shots. SGA irritates people because he doesn't miss, and then he gets fouled and he goes to the line and he's a 90% free throw shooter. He's efficient, and you can't deny that. But then you have the number two player who can score on his own. Doesn't, for instance, when I play, I tend to, if there's another guy who scores a lot and needs the ball a lot, I kind of get muted. It's it's hard for me to be, I'm not trying to toot my own horn. I play with different levels of players. And it's if I'm needed to be the scorer, I can be the scorer. But if I'm the second or third one, I can be more inconsistent because when do I pick my shots? Jalen Williams is a great number two scorer. He can let SGA be the guy and still somehow he gets 20 points a game. Those are very rare talents that really can make a championship team. At the same time, those two best players are amazing defenders. And by the way, almost the entire team, who could, you can't even pick an all defensive player on their team because they're all great defenders. People say SGA is not a good defender. He averages almost 2 steals a game. You can't be a bad defender and get 2 steals a game. That's just blasphemy. And then speaking of defenders, and forget defenders, how about 3 and D players, which are great for those 2 point of attacks? You have Lou Dort, you have Isaiah Joe, you have Jalen Williams, the center Jalen Williams, great 3-point shooters, people who can stretch the floor at multiple positions and knock down a reliable 3. That was what the Lakers were missing for years until JJ Redick started coaching them. And now they can win games. It's funny, the Lakers can win games despite being undersized because they have almost the best shooting team. They have a bunch of 3-point shooters now, where in the past, with the Kobe Bryant Lakers, they couldn't find any 3-point shooters. So you have this Thunder team. By the way, their centers, Holmgren and Hartenstein, great rebounders. Holmgren is great at shooting, a great stretch as well. Isaiah Hartenstein is very efficient near the rim. So you have another efficient scorer. People, they just don't miss shots. It's kind of the name of the game for basketball, right? And then you have these, players that, I don't want to say resurgent, but very highly valued bench players that are coming as reserves and scoring a lot. AJ Mitchell and Isaiah Joe. Isaiah Joe is one of the best shooters in the league. AJ Mitchell's probably 6th man of the year. Jared McCain, another 3-point shooter. So now you have all of these guys that are mentioned. Alex Caruso is a great vet that's great on defense and just makes plays in the playoffs. He has a resume. And then you start wondering, man, I've just mentioned, 10 players. And you wonder why they're the perfect team. They all play defense. They got great rebounding. Holmgren is blocking shots. SGA is blocking shots, and they're getting steals. These are the kind of things that go into what makes a great player in a highly regarded formula. So it's no wonder that SGA is leading the league in win shares. It's no wonder that the Thunder are leading the league in wins and point differential multiple years in a row. They are, as close to the perfect team as you can get.